Hi guys, and welcome to another 7-minute lecture. Are the USA and China heading for war? Or more importantly, are the USA and China destined for war? Is a showdown between them inevitable, unavoidable, or can it indeed be avoided? That's our topic today. To answer this question, we need to go back to around 2015, where a scholar named Graham Allison wrote a very influential piece in The Atlantic where he discussed what he called the Thucydides Trap. Let me explain what that is. So, some of you might know who Thucydides is. He's a famous ancient Greek historian, most well known for covering the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. Thucydides seemed convinced at the time that no two powers can coexist for a long period of time in an intense state of rivalry. Much like what happened with Athens and Sparta, Thucydides was of the belief that when two rival nations get big enough, then at a certain point, conflict between them becomes unavoidable. And he wrote this 2500 years ago. So Graham Allison, a modern scholar, said, hey, let me see if this theory holds up throughout history as well. Let me see if this holds up to this day. Because Thucydides is an ancient scholar, there's no reason for us to believe that it would have held up until now. And if it did, it might give us some interesting insight into where the US-China relationship is heading, right? So with a team of experts from Harvard, he went through what he considered to be 16 similar situations in the last 500 years, where there were either two regional or two international powers locked in a state of rivalry. And what the study found, he claimed, proves that Thucydides' theory was indeed true. He found that out of these 16 cases, in about 12 of them, Thucydides' conclusion did indeed prove right, that those two powers did indeed go for an armed conflict. So Graham Allison said, all right, in that case, this is indeed a valid theory. And he called it the Thucydides Trap. And he wrote an article, as I just said, for The Atlantic in 2015. And in the article, he brought this up. And he used it to argue that perhaps the USA and China were destined for war if a conscious effort was not taken to avoid it. Because if the Thucydides trap is a real thing, then only two real powers tangibly meet those requirements today, and that's the United States and China. This article created a lot of conversation and debate, as it rightly should. The most important geopolitical question, after all, is whether the United States and China are going to go to war. Many hawks on either side saw this as validation of their worldview, and in some cases, it took the rivalry to the next level. It crystallized the rivalry and gave that skeleton some meat and muscle to create a more complete picture. Because instinctively, it does make sense, doesn't it? It's a very clear and easily understood theory that when two rival powers become too big to coexist, they will eventually seek to wipe each other out. Or more importantly, when there is one incumbent power like the Spartans and a new rising power like the Athenians, there will be inherent concerns between the two that lead them to wipe each other out. So let's look at the logic underpinning this theory. Thucydides laid out two basic reasons for why this trap is triggered. The first was what he considered to be the ruling power's increasing sense of self-importance, its increasing sense of entitlement. And we do see that with China today. We see a resurgence in Chinese national pride. We've seen a drastic expansion of China's ambitions. And we've essentially seen them rethink what they consider to be their rightful place in the world. The second reason Thucydides laid out was the existing superpower's determination to hold on to its position of primacy, to hold on to the present balance of power where it reigns supreme. And we certainly see that too with the USA, where both domestic policy and international policy is clearly starting to reflect this need to maintain the American geopolitical dominance around the world. But I don't just want this to be a brief, non-critical snapshot lecture of the Thucydides Trap. I also wanted to give you, before I end it, something different. Since everybody just seems to be taking it for granted that the Thucydides Trap is a valid theory, let me give you two arguments for why we could, if we wanted to, argue that it's not a real thing, that it's a false theory, so to speak. The first is that if we actually look at the examples that Graham Allison took, the 16 case studies from the last 500 years, there's clearly a strong Western bias in the selection of countries. The 1600s onwards were a great time where there were many great empires in the East as well, like the Mughals in India, for instance. But other than the Japanese and the Ottomans, Graham Allison doesn't really look at any Eastern examples. He just takes mostly Western examples from the post-Westphalian world. So while this concept might be true in the Western Hemisphere, there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the Thucydides Trap will hold true for a country like China or anywhere in the non-Western Hemisphere in general. The second is that when we look at recent examples like the Cold War, for instance, this supposed Thucydides Trap never really materialized. In fact, out of the 16 rivalries that the study examined, this trap did not apply to the last three, all of which were in the 20th century. So even if we were to go by Graham Allison's own data, this theory might have been accurate until the 18th century, but after that it simply hasn't been triggered. The data itself suggests that the Thucydides Trap is perhaps outdated for modern times. There was certainly a day and age when it was valid, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So ultimately, guys, it's up to you to decide. I will post a link to the original article in the description of this video, and I hope it gave you something to think about. Let me know how you feel in the comment section, right? Do you feel that war between the USA and China is indeed inevitable, unavoidable? Or do you feel that all of this is simply empty smoke? If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care, thank you, and I'll see you soon.